Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Yeah, hi. Welcome back, everyone.
Well, today's topic is, does an organization have a personality? And this is episode number 22. So listen, you don't have to be a firefighter to listen to our podcast, because Emily and I, we talk about anything, everything related to leadership, but we do view it from a biblical world view.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Emily, let's go ahead and let's jump into our topic today.
Yeah, this coming Saturday is December 7th. And for those of you who may not know, it will be the 83rd anniversary of the Japanese sneak attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii that happened in 1941.
Yeah, that's correct. And simultaneously, Japanese were also attacking in the Philippines and portions of Southeast Asia. You might say, how can that happen? Well, it is still simultaneously, but it was December 7th in Hawaii. On the other side of the international date line, it was December the 8th. So on that morning, what did the Japanese accomplish there?
Yeah, so on that morning, there were 353 Japanese fighters, attack planes, and bombers that launched from 6 aircraft carriers and attacked the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor in 2 waves. And they also attacked nearby Marine Corps naval and Army airfields and bases.
All right, and continuing with more information on that, the Japanese sank 5 battleships and damaged 3. They sank a gunnery training ship and 3 destroyers, damaged a heavy cruiser, 3 light cruisers, 2 destroyers, 2 seaplane tenders, 2 repair ships, and a destroyer tender. Now, back in 2002, I had the opportunity to visit Pearl Harbor and take the launch out to the USS Arizona. At the time of the attack in 1941, there were 1,177 sailors and Marines on board the Arizona. After the attack, 1,102 sailors and Marines were killed. If you have the opportunity, folks, I encourage you to go out there if you go to Hawaii and make that trip out to the Arizona. It's a very somber experience. So also, Navy, Army, Marine Corps facilities suffered varying degrees of damage. There were 188 Navy, Marine Corps, and Army Air Force planes destroyed. From the casualty and killed in action and missing between the Marine Corps, Navy, and the Army, 2,235 personnel and 68 civilians were killed as well. Throughout the Marine Corps, Army, and Navy who were wounded, there was 1,143 and 35 civilians were wounded. So that was December 7th. Again, on December 8th, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressing Congress, referring to December 7th, 1941, a day which shall live in infamy, asked Congress to declare war on Japan, which happened. And then 2 days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. So looking back on this now, is the United States is involved in a 2-front war, one in Europe and then one in the Pacific. So today's topic is we're going to be looking at a book, not the entire book, or for those of you who are listening, you can't see this, but it's called Commanding the Pacific, Marine Corps Generals in World War II by Stephen R. Taffe. It's published in 2021 by the Naval Institute Press. So the question we're asking is, does an organization have personality? So with that being said, Emily, where are we going to go with this today?
Yes, we're just going to dive right on in. So in the introduction of the book on pages 4 through 5, we're going to unpack the statements and see how they impact the personality of an organization. So the quote starts that people can impact an organization's culture and effectiveness, and many do. So the question is, how does this happen?
Yeah, let's take a look at a Bible verse first from Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. So you asked me, hey, how can this happen? How can an organization's culture and effectiveness be impacted by people? Well, yeah, any organization is made up of people, but look at the leadership. Go to the top. You want to see an organization that's got good morale? Then take a look at what's happening up at the top. Does an organization have bad morale? Take a look at what's happening up
Yeah.
at the top. I think we have gone through a recent experience with a family member in a
Yes.
particular venue that she
Yeah.
was working at, where the owner has had an impact on the morale of all the employees. Matter of fact, this particular owner fired the manager that he hired before this particular franchise even opened up. And when we attended the Friends and Family Day at this place, the owner was just standing in the back of the store with a checklist and a scowl on his face. He looked more like a prison guard than the owner.
Yeah.
And our other daughter Rebecca, what she was sharing with us what was happening there in that establishment, I'll leave it at that, that she was working at, is that guy and his attitude and his demeanor and how he acted and how he treated the employees, that filters down to everybody and it creates a lousy atmosphere for people to work in.
Yeah.
On the opposite side of that, you and I both have worked at places where the leadership at the top has been good and the morale is good. And that does impact the organization. Consequently, it impacts the effectiveness of the organization.
Yeah.
Going back to our story with, with Rebecca, and people who don't want to work someplace, that starts to come across to the customers, or in my case where I was working in the fire service, that comes across to the public when they can say, hey, something is wrong here. What is their attitude? What is happening?
Yeah.
So that's just a short snippet, Emily, of how people are impacting an organization and its effectiveness.
Yeah. So the quote continues that an organization is no better than its leaders, and superior resources and technology rarely compensate for poor leadership.
Yeah,
Ooh,
absolutely. There's a lot of misplaced ideas out here in our
yeah.
world today that where they think that, from a technology aspect, oh, we got the latest and greatest software. We've got the latest and greatest equipment, and whatever that equipment could be. Whether it's in the military, they've got the, best aircraft, best, armor, best artillery, in the fire service. We got the latest and greatest fire apparatus, the latest and greatest truck company, latest and greatest rescue tools, and so forth and so on, like that. The technology, like the Taft wrote in his book, does not compensate for poor leadership because technology only goes so far. As we've talked about in the past here, ever
Yeah.
since we've been doing this podcast, there's a big difference between leadership and management. But to recap for somebody who hasn't heard what we've had to say about this, leadership is about people, and management is about processes and systems and resources. And that's where technology falls into. The hey, people, yeah, an organization can have all the greatest whiz bang stuff, but if the individual or individuals at the top aren't doing what they need to be doing, then nothing's going to move forward like it should be. It's just not a good situation whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about Eisenhower's quote that he mentions on page 5 in the book?
Yeah, President Eisenhower, well, at the time it was General Eisenhower. He was the commanding general, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Forces. And Eisenhower said, quote, the certainty with which you can judge a division or any other large unit merely by knowing its commander intimately, unquote. So what in the world did he mean by that? That meant that he could take a look at those units, look at who was leading those units, look at their character, look at their integrity, other characteristics, their tactical, technical capabilities and competence, and make a judgment right off the bat and say, this is going to be a good unit or this is going to be a
Mm,
bad unit. And what does this come down to? Relationships.
mhm.
Relationships. Because how did Eisenhower know this? Through developing relationships with the men who were assigned to him. So leaders who are interacting with their subordinates and they get to know them. And I'm not, you've heard me say this before, if you're a regular listener, I'm not talking about fishing buddies. I'm not talking about that thing, because that could go to the other side to where it's detrimental.
Yeah.
What I am referring to are leaders who spend time with people. They
Intentionally.
intentionally, yeah, they intentionally spend time with people to get to know them. And when that happens and they observe them, they learn what their capabilities are. That's how I learned a lot what happened with the officers on my shift. I went out to the fire stations. I sat down with everybody. I had coffee with them. I talked to them. But where did I learn about their capabilities? Two places. Number one, at the scene of an emergency, but number
Mm,
two, when we went out and we did actual hands-on drills. And I could observe their decision-making abilities, and I could decide, or excuse me, I could see how they decided on what actions that they needed to take. And then I could see, hey, there's some good capabilities here. There's some others that need to be refined, or like when I first got promoted to battalion chief, I had a couple officers on my shift. It's like, oh boy, yeah, there's a lot of work that has to happen right
yeah.
there with that.
Yeah, so Taft continues to say that the exact level of a commander's personality and ability is always reflected in his unit. How infallibility, the commander and unit are almost one and the same thing. So, how is this so?
It's an interesting thing that takes place with human behavior. And I saw this transition happen at Love and Fire Rescue, where for a long time we were not on the same page. And this is not an uncommon issue. Happens in a lot of fire departments. So we had three shifts. And at that point, we had five stations. When I got promoted, five stations here in the city, and then two more, actually three more that were up in the canyon. And but down here in the city, three shifts, five fire stations under one name, but essentially we had 15 different fire departments that were operating, and there was very, very little unity that was taking place. However, across the three shifts, the shifts were taking on the personality of the battalion chief. Fortunately, that all changed in that period around 2006, 2007, when we had a fire chief that, said we're going to be one department, and it took a lot of work. But even though we moved and we got on the same page, it was easy to see that out of the three shifts, all three shifts were taking on the personality of the battalion chief.
Hmm,
And I think that that is a very interesting thing from a human behavior standpoint.
yeah.
And it could be good and it can be a bad thing as well.
How is it good or bad? Could you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, if you have a leader who is a person that has strong character, that's going to get transferred out to the organization, out to the unit, out to the shift, out to the stations, in my
Hmm.
case. And they just start to pick things up. They start to learn the nuances. And I'll give my example. They started to learn my nuances. They knew what I expected. Of course, you got to tell them, folks, what you expect of them. Yes, we had department level expectations, but also I had expectations as the shift commander. But we have to convey that out to people. If you're not conveying those expectations, then they're not going to know what to do.
Yeah.
And it creates an awful lot of confusion. So convey those expectations, let them know what they are, and then the character of the leader is much easily more transferred out to the people. And so that's an example where that's good. We could just flip the coin, Emily. On the bad side is if you have a leader who has no character
Yeah.
whatsoever, then you know what? You start to see things unravel very, very quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of bad things start to happen, bad decisions start to happen. You'll see a lot of disciplinary problems start to pop up
Hmm.
as well. So
Hmm.
yes, there is good and bad to that.
It's kind of like that saying, you become who you hang out with the most, or
That's yeah.
something like whatever,
Yeah,
however the saying
yeah,
goes.
something like that. Like I heard a preacher say many, many years ago, you can't run with a skunk and smell like a rose.
Yeah.
Now, listen, what I'm saying too, Emily, is in an organization, if there's a bad leader and those bad characteristics are being pushed out there, that doesn't mean that everybody takes on those characteristics.
Yeah.
I want to make I want to make that clear. And it's on the other side of that too. You can have a good leader, but it doesn't mean that everybody is going to take on those characteristics as well, because every organization has got people who, rise to the top. They work hard, they perform well, they have strong character, and every organization's got the people who don't rise to the top. They're sinking to the bottom, and they're nothing but trouble. Yeah,
Hmm.
and they need to go away. So getting back to the book, Taft pointed out to the fact that the years between World War One and World War II, high-ranking officers in the Marines all knew each other personally or by reputation.
So, what do you think the benefits are from this?
You get to know people.
Mm.
And again, you're learning their capabilities. You know what their personality is like. You learn how they lead. And so you can see how are they going to best fit into the organization. Now, when I was a battalion chief, I had officers that were assigned to me, and we take them, shape and mold and so forth like that. And as I got to know them more and more and more, some of our communication techniques were refined to the point that we didn't even speak verbally on scene. We would just, use a couple of hand gestures. Now, for firefighters who are listening out there, say, "Hey, well, what happens if nobody else knows what's going on?" No, it's not that. There's just some of those things that when the guy's going to go to the roof and he wants to let me know he's going to go to the roof, all he's got to do is just do some hand signals, point, and next thing I see is the ladder is going to the roof and they're going up there. I'm not talking about, cutting out critical communication. So those are benefits of getting to know people, especially when, you're at a higher rank or a higher position, and you need to know, who can I trust?
Yeah. But what are the downfalls?
The good old boy system.
Mm.
Yep. I become friends with Joe. Joe becomes friends with Ed. And that turns into a situation
The
where,
club.
what's that?
The club.
Yeah, the club. Yes, it turns into the club, and we are going to overlook each other's faults. We are going to
Mm.
overlook these things. Or, you know what? I really know that Bill over there is not doing what he needs to be doing, and he's got some character faults, but we spend a lot of time together. We're really good friends, and I just don't want to damage that relationship.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, those are the downfalls to that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, page 18 of the book, Taft wrote, quote, some officers occasionally gave their subordinates glowing evaluations and official reports, but condemned their performance in informal correspondence with Major General Thomas Holcomb, the Commandant of the Marine Corps.
Hmm. So, what does this say about the character of those officers who did that?
They have flaws. They
Hmm.
they absolutely have flaws.
Yeah. Do you believe those junior officers knew what was going on?
You can only keep things quiet so long.
Yeah.
And people are going to start to, sooner or later, somebody's going to say something. It's like, what? Yeah, he's saying that about me, or is it she's saying that about me? What?
Mm.
What's going on here?
Yeah. What would their reactions be
Just
to
like,
that? Just like what you were
yeah,
saying,
just like
right?
I was saying, yeah,
Yeah.
could you think of something, if you found that out, how would you react?
Negatively.
Yeah.
Shock.
Yeah, you have a
Yeah.
boss that's, I'm your boss, I'm writing a glowing evaluation, but I'm talking about behind your back.
Yeah.
Besides negatively, what other impact would that have on you?
I would feel betrayed and lied to and feel like they're narcissistic, telling me one thing to my face, but saying something else behind my back, passive aggressive, a lot of different words, you know?
Would you have trust in me?
No, absolutely not. My trust would be completely shattered.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
So what about Holcomb?
Well, Taft wrote, quote, Holcomb disliked and complained about this subterfuge, but his efforts to stamp it out failed, unquote. Now, Taft
Hmm.
didn't go into a lot of detail about that, but folks, Holcomb was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And when I read that statement there, it said he, failed at attempts to stamp it out. That's an indication to me that that monster had grown really, really big, that even the guy up at the top, was having a lot of difficulty stamping that thing out.
Wow. So what kind of picture did those negative comments paint for Holcomb? And even though he disliked what was taking place, did it skew his view of those junior officers?
I believe it did.
Mm,
And I think Taft pointed that out a couple places, in the book.
wow.
And you know what? If somebody is in your ear and they're constantly talking bad about someone else,
Yeah.
at what point that, if somebody's talking bad to me about Joe Schmuckatelli and I'm not saying anything, I'm not stopping it and I'm not questioning it, at what point do I start to believe, wow, this guy Schmuckatelli's really a bad dude?
Yeah.
Why do we even have him around? And you see that a lot. Gossip,
Hmm.
gossip that takes place in organizations. And you know what, folks? I have seen it play out more than one time where somebody in the chain of command has got the ear of a person at the top and they're bad mouthing one, two, three people, and it paints a bad picture of them.
Yeah.
And it
Absolutely.
also indicates that there's a character issue taking place between the person who's running those people down and the person who's listening to this stuff and not questioning it and saying, prove it to me, show it to me. Why do you keep coming to me and complaining about these people? So there's a leadership failure on both sides there.
Yeah. So does Taft talk about this, or do you believe it had an impact on their future career with the Marine Corps?
Taft didn't talk about that, and it could be that it had an impact on our future career in the Marine Corps. And I've read several other cases throughout the years, not only in the military, but in other organizations where, talking bad about somebody has had an impact on their future in the career
Yeah.
because people they just start believing this stuff, which yeah, it just brings up a thought that I remember when we were going to church down in Parker and Ward Smith, the pastor, when he was talking about gossip and a correct way to address gossip is going back to that person and saying,
Yeah.
I heard something that I'd like to believe isn't true. And then you state that, and then you give that person the opportunity to say, no, I never said that about you at all. Or, you're going to know right off the bat if they did, because as soon as you say, I think I heard something I like to believe is not true.
Yeah.
Did you say such and such, blah, 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 blah? You'll be able to tell by their body language right off the bat.
Yep.
Now, they might not admit to it, but verbally, they may not admit to it, but yeah, physically watch
You'll
their
be able
body
to see
language.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you will
Yeah.
definitely be able to see it.
Yeah. You always got to go back to the original source.
Yeah. So, question I want to ask our listeners, what about you? Are you the type of supervisor that writes glowing evaluations on a subordinate, but then stabs them in the back to your boss and others? I saw that occur in my organization just prior to me getting promoted to battalion chief. My battalion chief would come out to my fire station and complain to me about another lieutenant on the shift. He would complain about him. He would put him down. It was just like rapid fire vent, hop in his vehicle and leave and then leave me standing out there stunned. It's like, hey, what in the world just happened here? It happened so
Mm.
quick that you know many times I didn't even have the opportunity to say, have you talked to him about this? But then when I did ask, hey, have you spoken to this guy about these things that you're complaining about? And I never got a straight answer. Well,
Mhm.
I found out that as much as my battalion chief literally hated this guy, he never wrote anything negative about him in the evaluation. It was
Wow.
always glowing evaluations. And unfortunately for me, I had to pick up that damage there and carry it forward because the one that he was complaining about was a trouble, was definitely
Mm,
was a troublemaker. So the supervisors
mm,
who are bad mouthing people, but they're giving them glowing evaluations, you're setting up problems all the way down the line because you are continually feeding fuel into the problem child. And then the next supervisor that comes along,
yeah.
yeah, they've got to pick up and they got to start right from scratch.
Mm,
And that's what human resources told me on this one is Rick, nobody has ever written anything bad about this guy.
wow.
You got to start from the beginning. So
Wow.
those, yeah, Emily, those are problems. You know,
So I,
that,
oh, sorry. So I think it comes to asking you, our listeners, do you have the character and courage to address issues ahead of time without being a disingenuous individual?
right. Yep, absolutely. It takes courage. Have that
Absolutely.
courage.
Yeah.
Now,
Do it scared.
yeah, listen, hey, folks,
Yeah.
it's not a fun thing to go confront somebody
Mm-mm.
and talk to them. And you don't need to come, riding in like John Wayne in one of the old westerns and getting off the horse and kicking in the bar room door. Don't need to do it like that. But these issues they do need to be addressed because our original question was, do organizations take on the personality of their leaders? And yeah, when the leaders at the top are not addressing these type of issues, guess what? You're
It trickles down.
excusing, yep, it trickles down and you're excusing the behavior of everybody else. But interestingly enough, what I have also seen is those supervisors who, won't do that stuff are questioning other supervisors below them. Why aren't you doing it?
Mm,
So yeah, but absolutely, that does have an impact. Their personality, their style of leadership has an impact on the organization, the unit, the shift, so forth and so on, like that. And that has that impact on the efficiency of the organization as well, which is
yeah.
where we originally started. So that's it for episode 22. Today, we've talked about organizations' effectiveness, how it's impacted by its culture, organizations that take on the character of the leader, good and the bad of knowing people directly
Mhm.
or through a reputation, and the impacts of backstabbing superiors. All this contributes to the personality of an organization. And folks, listen, if you have found this episode to be useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Visit my website at fireofficerleadershipacademy.com. The link is in the show notes, and you can learn more about the services I offer. On my website, you can also visit my weekly blog that gets posted up on very early on Monday mornings, and then I repost it on LinkedIn on Wednesdays. So thanks for tuning in and listening. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.